evening and welcome once again to Matters of Faith, our weekly quest to discover the dimensions and depths of faith in India. I often ask myself one basic question: why do people believe? Not for a moment do I pretend to know the answer to that question. The old saying that if God did not exist, we would have had to invent him seems inadequate to me as a response. What I do know for a fact is that faith is the sole undying bond between continents and between generations. In all other respects, we live very differently from our forefathers. We do not eat the way they did. We do not clothe ourselves the way they did. We do not fend for our material needs the way they did. Frequently, we do not even inhabit the same spaces that they did. Even when we worship differently from the way they did, we recognize somehow that while the outward trappings of worship may have changed, the core of belief remains intact, identical from one generation to another, from one civilization to another. I wonder sometimes whether this core of belief is not in fact more a way of reaching out and touching a fragment of the past, more a means of giving our own brief passage on the planet some higher purpose, than a strategy to negotiate with a supreme deity and obtain petty material favors. Our first story in tonight's edition of Matters of Faith is likely to lend some strength to my argument when we take a look at the Govindji Temple in Imphal and examine the ways in which Vaishnavism, the dominant faith in the plains of Manipur, integrates several aspects of that beautiful state's pre-Vaishnavite past.
Literally, Manipur means a jewel land, and the oval-shaped, verdant valley seems to justify this description. In matters of faith, Manipur is India in miniature, for its people follow a variety of religious paths. Amongst the Métis, those who inhabit the valley, the dominant faith is Vaishnavism, which first came to Manipur about 500 years ago. After a victorious battle around 1470 AD, the Manipuri king Kyamba received a present from his ally, the king of Pong, a little stone image of a fully armed Vishnu, holding a lotus and riding on the back of Garuda. Sometime later, the king fell seriously ill. The traditional oracles he consulted said no cure would be forthcoming unless he offered worship to Vishnu. Thus, the foundations of the first Vaishnavite temple in Manipur were laid at Lamangdong, now known as Bishnupur. The twin domes of the Govindji temple, said to represent Radha and Krishna, which dominate downtown Imphal near the royal palace, are proof of the central place Vaishnavism has come to occupy in the Métis' lives. The morning Aarti begins with a kirtan by the temple musicians. The story of Vaishnavism in Manipur, its first appearance in the region in the 15th century, the roots it gradually sank in the soil, its interaction with existing systems of worship, its growth from a cult favored by the royals to a widespread, vibrant, popular faith, is a moral tale in itself, a pointer to the processes of history that have operated over the ages all over India and made this ancient land a repository of every faith known to mankind. Vaishnavite worship in Manipur derives essentially from the Chaitanya school and has been in practice in Manipuri temples since Maharaja Jai Singh formally adopted the faith in the latter half of the 18th century. Understanding the impact of the Chaitanya school is important. The key here is bhakti, the sweet ecstasy of surrender to the Almighty. Collective musical worship, as in kirtan, and the celebration of divinity through dance are seen to be an essential part of this process of surrender. The Chaitanya Vaishnavite emphasis on music and dance as part of worship integrated well with the traditional Métis passion for music, dance and physical culture. Thus, The temple was not only a place of worship, but also a platform and showcase for music and dance. From this integration arose Manipur's famed Rasa dance and the Sankirtanas. The images of Krishna or Govindji, Radha and Balram that lie in Imphal's Govindji temple are believed to have come from Puri. Devotees wait in the paved courtyard and in a large raised congregation hall whilst the priest performs puja inside the sanctum. In time, the priest will offer to Govindji the Shuddh vegetarian food prepared by the cooks in the temple kitchen. After the food has been blessed by Govindji, it is served to the faithful who have gathered in the temple. In earlier times, in fact, nobody in Imphal would consume the midday meal until the peal of bells from the temple indicated that the ritual offering of food to Govindji was complete. Vaishnavism in Manipur is a reminder of a time when the gods circulated amongst men, when they partook in men's joys and sorrows, and would instantly communicate their wrath or pleasure in a variety of simple signs and symbols. The gods asked for little in return, just simple, unquestioning faith.
We're all taught at our mother's knees that faith can move mountains. We often believe that this proposition applies only to the great bhaktas, whose tales are told in our epics and Puranas, and not to our benighted Kali-yuga. Yet as our story tonight in the myriad part segment teaches us, such pure, unshakable faith can also be found in our own times, and we come across the occasional individual whose life and deeds do not merely reflect the best tenets of his religion, but leave glorious, enduring proof of it.
Deep in the recesses of downtown Calcutta, amidst its chaotic hurly-burly, there stands a cluster of Jain temples, a carefully crafted island of contemplation set in one of Calcutta's prettiest gardens. The main temple in the complex was built in 1867 by Rai Badridas Bahadur, a Calcutta jeweller. Badridas was appalled at the cruelty with which pilgrims treated the fish in the tank of a nearby shrine. He resolved then to put up a temple dedicated to the 10th Tirthankara, Sheetalnath, protector of all aquatic creatures. His determination and faith translated themselves into this magnificent complex of temples dominated by the Sheetalnath shrine. Interesting story is told about the image of Sheetalnath housed in the temple. After the construction of the temple was complete, Rai Badridas Bahadur was advised by his guru Sri Kalyan Suri to travel far and wide to find a suitable image of the 10th Tirthankara. And so he journeyed extensively, but his quest seemed doomed. Finally, in distant Agra, he met an unknown holy man to whom he confided that while he had built this magnificent temple, he had not been able to find a suitable image of Sheetalnath to preside over it. The holy man led Badridas Bahadur to a spot and told him his quest was at an end. The next day, Badridas and his men dug deep at that spot. They came across a staircase which led them down to a cave. There, they found this image of Sheetalnath. And though there was no obvious sign of recent human activity, The light from an oil lamp cast its warm glow in the cave. Rai Badridas Bahadur reverentially removed the image of the Tirthankara in order to take it with him to Calcutta. But when he emerged from the cave to thank the holy man who had guided him there, he was gone. Around the Sheetalnath temple today, the air resounds with the refrain of the Sanatra Puja, Jainism's most important puja, performed before any auspicious occasion. The puja, which is believed to have originated on Mount Meru, when Indra and the other devas celebrated with utmost reverence the birth of God. This soothing sound seems to define the harmony one discerns in the temple, in the convergence of the three Ratna, the three jewels of Jainism: Samyak Darshana, the right vision; Samyak Jnana, the right knowledge; and Samyak Charitra, or the right conduct. Ahimsa, the underlying principle beneath all three precepts, is illustrated in the ponds that dot the temple's gardens, in which the fish play fearlessly with visitors and pilgrims.
One of the most striking things about the manifestations of faith is the extent to which music is somehow bound up with it. Music is the means of transmission of faith, not only from the worshipper to the Almighty, but also from the worshipper to the worshipper. This is especially true in India, where the great saints use musical compositions not only to create a climate of fervor and devotion in their following, but also as vehicles of thought and wisdom. The chants of Tibetan Buddhism induce in us this very sentiment of peace and contemplation.
Yamantaka is the conjunction of two Sanskrit words, Yama, death, and Antaka, one who crushes or destroys. Hence, Yamantaka, the destroyer of death. Death here refers to the inner and secret deaths associated with mind and subtle energies. In Yamantaka, this meditation forms the ground of the tantric practice of Yamantaka visualization, self-generation, and completion stages. The purpose of the practice is to transform one's three ordinary stages of being, namely death, intermediate state, and rebirth, into the three stages of divinity. Yamantaka is invoked. To the ringing of bells and chanting, an offering of wine is made to the protectors of Dharma. This offering of drink is done symbolically by offering black tea to request the removal of obstacles. In esoteric Buddhism, the Dharma protectors are the guardians of Buddha's doctrine. It is customary among Tibetan Buddhists for monks to perform the Janchog, purification, during the 7 weeks following the death of a person, to purify and guide the consciousness through the state called the intermediate or Bardo. An offering is made to the king of obstacles to dispel any kind of hindrances, and frankincense is burnt and mustard seed thrown to drive them away. After this, the actual purification practices can begin. The crown initiation is performed in full costumes of tantric ritual. The crown initiation corresponds to the Buddha's Ratna Sambhava. This initiation purifies the 5 delusions, transforms one of the 5 aggregates, and achieves the realization of one of the 5 wisdoms. Offerings are made to the deity Mahakala, the protector of Dharma. When Yamantaka meditation is practiced, Mahakala helps the worshipper to proceed without any disturbance. One of the main rituals is the offering of water, flowers, incense, lamps, and food. The recitation of auspicious verses form part of aspirational prayers. Flower offerings are also made, ending with a dedication to all sentient beings. Meditation and chanting are vehicles for awareness of the self.
Many of us wrongly believe that Christianity did not come to India until the 15th century, when a Portuguese sailor called Vasco da Gama landed at Calicut. The fact is that long before Christianity made its presence felt in Europe, and before the Holy Church had been established in Rome, the gospel had been brought to large numbers of people in present-day Kerala and Tamil Nadu by St. Thomas the Apostle. In our great visionary segment tonight, we trace his Indian journey, a saga of courage and undying faith.
In the 10th book of Matthew, it is said that Jesus called his 12 disciples together and bade them to go forth. Preach as you go, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. And if anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet as you leave that house or town." Among those who listened attentively to Jesus was the apostle Thomas. It is said that after preaching for some years in Iraq and Iran, Thomas crossed the Arabian Sea and arrived on the coast of Kerala in the year 52 AD. As he drifted towards the shores of India, towards this strange land known to the rest of the world only through fable and myth, there welled within him the resolve to show India the true light that enlightens every man, to spread the word of God, the word that had become flesh and dwelt amongst men, full of grace and truth. Soon after reaching Malabar, St. Thomas scaled the 1,000 feet high Malyatur Mount, where he spent several days in prayer and contemplation, before moving amongst the people of the region, preaching to them, drawing them to his faith. As his congregation grew, he founded churches all over Kerala. He would withdraw from time to time to his retreat atop the Malayatur Mount. Here he would draw a cross on a rock, kiss it and pray to it. That cross came to be known as Ponkurishu, the Golden Cross. It is believed that during one such retreat, he saw a vision that traced his path to Tamil Nadu, or Pandya Desam as it was known at that time. St. Thomas sailed to the Coromandel coast near Chennai, where he preached to and baptized large numbers of people. From there, he is believed to have left for China, where he pursued his mission before returning to the Coromandel. Opposition to him intensified, but the apostle was not to be deflected from the path he had set for himself. With time, his little flock grew in numbers. Finally, one day, as he was praying atop what is called the Little Mount, his persecutors caught up with him and put him to death. 2 churches here commemorate the spot where he took refuge when fleeing his tormentors, and the cave where he apparently met his end. Some distance away from the Little Mount, atop a hillock now named St. Thomas Mount, in a 16th century Portuguese-built church, a stone bears the engraved cross to which the apostle was praying when he was killed. In fact, when the Portuguese first came to Chennai early in the 16th century and learned of the Indian experience of the apostle, they were inclined to be skeptical, for this seemed to give light to the accounts of St. Thomas's life as recounted in the Acts of the Apostles. Yet there seemed evidence too for the Indian tradition. Skepticism turned to belief. The Portuguese excavated the saint's remains from the tomb at the Little Mount and moved them to the site of his house by the Bay of Bengal. They built a church of the site. That church, now known as the San Thome Cathedral, salutes the Indian journey of an apostle who had faithfully obeyed the bidding of his master. On rising from the dead, Jesus had told his disciples, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always to the close of the age."
Certain buzzwords dominate our times. Communication is one. Information is another. By definition, both these terms imply a process of opening out, of contact between people. Yet if the present trends in communication and information processing technologies are any guide, these terms will soon begin to negate their true meaning. The atomization of the individual seems inevitable. Every human being will become an island, and the world will become an archipelago. Human beings feel less and less the need to reach out and make contact with other human beings. What are the implications of this likely evolution for faith? Will faith just wither away as individuals drown in pleasure and information? We know that faith operates at 2 levels: within oneself and between one and one's fellow human beings. Will we soon see the death of the faith that unites men amongst themselves? Or are we taking too bleak a view of the emerging scenario? Could it be possible? Is there just the faintest chance that when human beings have tired of knowing more and more about less and less, when solitude becomes loneliness, that they will look anew at the universe and ask themselves the same simple, hard questions that our ancestors must have asked millions of years ago? And when that happens, Will not faith be born again, clearer and purer than ever, free of fear, hatred, and prejudice? Viewed in that light, the age of information may not be such a bad thing after all. Thank you for being with us. Do join us again next week for another edition of Matters of Faith. Goodbye and good night.